With the finale wrapped up, today we're ranking every Arcane character from good to evil, with one of the most morally diverse casts that we've covered on this channel. As usual, we'll be starting with the most noble character and working our way down to the most evil. These characters are the good. And there are surprisingly many heroes in the world of Arcane, but while it was a tough choice, we have to give the gold medal of good to Professor Heimerdinger. Even before the events of Season 2, Heimerdinger would have been a shoo-in for our top spot. With a centuries-long lifespan and a brilliant, wise mind, he's always looking out for the good of the people. He takes pride in his work as a teacher and does all he can to protect his students and keep them on the right path, like advising Jace not to tell the council that he was trying to create magic so he'd avoid being expelled. Jace would not, in fact, listen. While some would point out that Heimerdinger lacks faith in Jace and Victor's research,
a breakthrough like this takes time, Victor. Putting that kind of power into everyone's hands is dangerous.
And can sometimes be insensitive to the mindsets of mortal creatures, it's worth remembering that Heimerdinger has been alive long enough to see the exact terror that could arise from abuse of such power as Hextech. The guy is literally just trying to prevent World War III, and he's thanked for this by being kicked out of the council by his own pupil. But the aftermath of this is the reason why we decided to bring Heimerdinger to the top of our list. After being kicked from the council, Heimerdinger goes down to Zaun to offer his assistance to the people, which results in him adopting Echo as a pupil and in Season 2, helping him create a time machine capable of bringing him back to his own timeline. He becomes a beloved member of the community, from helping improve their technology to playing with the local kids. Not only that, but after dropping the greatest country single of the past decade, Heimerdinger sacrifices his life so Echo can go home and help save his timeline from total devastation. Or at least it appears that way. But apparently his species is immortal in the game, so he's probably just respawning somewhere right now. So wipe those tears, everyone. Heimerdinger's still out there, and he's awarded the gold medal of good, provided he never stops playing that wonderful music. But our silver medal of good has to go to Isha. Without even one line of dialogue, Isha was able to capture the hearts of both Jinx and the audience. During a time of loneliness and despair, Isha is taken in by Jinx as a friend and pseudo-little sister, reviving the goodness in his heart that had long been dormant. Of course, looking up to Jinx could make Isha a little bit mischievous, or in layman's terms, a domestic terrorist. We have to remember she's a very young child and is simply remaining loyal to her family. We see how good she is in the finale of Act 2, where she sacrifices her life to save Jinx, and on top of that, she's humble enough to not even make some big speech while she does it. That's true heroism right there. And rounding out our top 3 with the bronze medal of good, we have one of the less on-screen heroes, Felicia. Since she's only seen in a flashback during Act 2, there isn't much to say about her. After being murdered in an altercation with enforcers, Vander takes in Felicia's little daughters, Powder and Violet, 2 little girls who would surely proceed to live happy, peaceful, normal lives. Later on, we find the reason why Vander took the girls in. He, Silco, and Felicia were close friends for years and constantly spent time with each other.
I can't protect her from all the shit down here and work out how to be a parent at the same time.
And their little girls until her life came to an end. Sometimes the best way to be a hero is to just be a good mother to your family, and that's something Felicia had in spades. But let's talk about the first of the main Undercity kids, Echo. This little man acted as the informant for Vander's kids whenever there was an opportunity to perform a great heist, or on one particularly dangerous occasion, to save their father's life. In the future, when 2 of his friends are dead and the other 2 are at war, Echo becomes a founding member of the Firelights, creating a community around a single tree to give the people underground hope.
Pretty cool, huh? When I first saw it, I knew this was the place. If a single seed can make it down here, so could we.
While he is, admittedly, understandably, opposed to enforcers and other high-ranking topsiders, Echo takes a liking to Heimerdinger pretty much immediately, and accepts his offer to mentor him, leading to the 2 improving their community and becoming even more beloved than before. But what ranks Echo so high up on our list comes down to his loyalty. Echo will do anything for his people, whether it's risking his neck to escape a utopian alternate universe to help his friends back home, or even as simple as fighting off Jinx so Kate and Vi will have time to escape.
Oh, look who it is. The boy savior.
Echo might not be an official hero. In fact, he's more of a vigilante than anything. But people like him give hope to their communities and beyond, and that's worth a lot in our book. Next up, we have the legendary Vander. Right off the bat, Vander stayed true to protecting Felicia's daughters when they were orphaned. And while it's not really known why, he did the same for Milo and Clagger as well. Vander is the kind of guy who will always stand up for the weak and powerless in his community, from the obvious quadruple adoption thing, to the fact that he was quick to stand up for Huck when his business partner tried to cheat him out of their agreed upon price.
How about you just give Huck the rest of what you owe him, and I'll let you walk out of here in one piece.
That's not to say Vander is perfect, mind you. After Felicia's death, his falling out with Silco ultimately led to him nearly drowning him. A pretty terrible lapse of morality, even if he never truly forgave himself for it. As awful as that was, though, Vander redeems himself on the whole by doing everything he can to protect his family, from his children to Zahn as a whole. Even when he's mutated beyond recognition by Singed, Vander holds on to every last memory of his daughters, until he's sadly too far gone to save. But maybe we can revisit that later. For now, we'll give a quick mention to his old buddy, Benzo, who, despite me believing so for years, isn't actually an adoptive father to Echo. But if anything, that makes him even better. I mean, think about it. Plenty of people have dealt with horrible bosses in their lifetimes, but Benzo always treated Echo with respect and care. When Echo is able to see him again in the alternate timeline, he tells him point blank that he means the world to him.
Boy, one of those days, huh?
And on top of that, Benzo does genuinely care about Vander and the rest of his community. But let's talk about the first of Vander's adoptive kids, Clagger. Honestly, the only reason he's the highest of the bunch isn't because he has any particularly heroic attributes to him. It's more like he doesn't have any unheroic ones. Unlike Milo, he's generally nice to Jinx, and to all his siblings really, and even offers to rescue her when she seems hesitant to do parkour in episode 1. He also commits the completely understandable crime of stealing a cupcake, which we'll give him the Gluttony Sinner medal for. And if that's the worst thing you do in this series, you're doing pretty great. But for now, it's time to get back to the main characters of the show, starting with one of the 3 leading ladies herself, Vi. Vi is an interesting one in that she's objectively done some pretty terrible stuff. You've heard of the fight or flight response, but for Vi, her flight gland has never worked properly. This girl is always ready to throw hands. Literally, those gauntlets are her bread and butter.
We need to fight back. And if you won't, I will.
And it usually leads to disaster. That said, you have to remember that she's grown up in the dark pits of the Undercity her whole life. Fighting for what she cares about is all she really knows, so we can't knock her too hard for that. If anything, Vi is surprisingly compassionate for all she's been through. She's ultimately willing to forgive Jinx when she starts to turn her life around, forgives Kate for literally hitting her with a rifle, and abandoning her after almost killing a child.
Kate, she's a child.
Yeah, we're still kind of pissed about that one. And does a lot to protect the Undercity from the people who threaten it. Whether she's acting as a punk kid with a heart of gold or a willing adult soldier, Vi is always taken after Vander in her devotion to protecting the people who matter the most. And that makes her worthy of a high spot on our list. She just needs a little more self-control, maybe. And as long as we're talking about Vi, how could we forget her iconic best friend? Let me Google his name real quick. Loris? You know, this dude. Come on, you remember Loris? Remember when he talked to Vi? And, he was like an enforcer. And then he died? He was certainly there. And was a nice friend of Vi, even waiting by her bed in episode 8 when she was recovering from combat. But he doesn't really do all that much, so I'm not gonna pretend I have any clue what Arcane was cooking with this guy. And speaking of cooking, let's talk about Jericho, a chef from the Undercity who's happy to help Vi and Kate on their search for Jinx. After letting them eat an absolutely gorgeous meal on the house,
Jericho, have I missed these?
Jericho slips them a paper, scavenger hunt style, to help them on their quest, showing that he is a generous guy. Still, this is pretty much his only appearance, which is probably because the showrunners realized that too much Jericho would have taken away all glory from the other characters. Milo is up next, rounding out the non-supervillain members of Vander's kids. Milo is an expert lockpicker, or he was a lockpicker, at least. He always did his part on the team's heists, which explains why he was easily frustrated by Powder not pulling his weight.
Every time she comes, something goes wrong. She jinxes every job.
Still, aside from being generally mean, Milo was never an outright bully or anything, just kind of a jerk. At the end of the day, he was just a kid trying to survive in a cruel world, a goal that would sadly elude him. But if his multiverse counterpart is any indication, he would have easily straightened out and had a better life for himself one day. She may sound like she should be in the next category, but Grayson was surprisingly one of the more morally upright characters in the series. She wasn't able to shine for very long, but from what we can tell, she was more or less a decent enforcer who cared about her people, at least for topside.
The council needs someone to make an example of. People need to feel safe.
In her own words to Kate, her weapon was meant to protect people, which shows that if nothing else, her heart was in the right place.
I'm an enforcer. For me, knowing how to handle this weapon means being able to protect people, to be of service to the city. That's trophy enough.
Despite working for a corrupt government, she genuinely tried her hardest to avoid whatever casualties she could, shown by her bartering with Vander. But at the end of the day, an enforcer still has to enforce. Or had to enforce. Rest in peace. A quick mention of Skye is in order. Victor and her were pretty close at the university, or at least Skye wanted them to be. But after Victor accidentally vaporizes her during one of his experiments, which was primarily due to her trying to protect him, mind you, they were left stranded in the cosmos together. As a result, Skye stayed by Victor's side and helped him run his weird healing cult, seemingly unconcerned with how far he was willing to go. I get having a crush, but being willing to die to help him get closer to his new world order is, well, if it weren't for a very specific scene in Act 3, Skye would be getting the less Sinner medal pretty easily, but more on that later. Next is Mel Medarda. Despite being a Medarda, a family notorious for their ruthless efforts to assert dominance over those beneath them,
you'd give me a throne.
I will give you the world, child.
Mel is ultimately a much better person than her blood would suggest. She can be manipulative at times, sure, most notably in Season 1, where she was a huge driving force behind Jace's rushed ambitions with Hextech, leading to him getting Heimerdinger kicked off the council. She also tends to see people as investments, and while she doesn't mean anything bad by this, it does go to show that she can lack sensitivity in her dealings with others. In any case, though, Mel is able to overcome her family legacy and forge her own path.
Mel, would you like...
Willing to stand up to her mother and help to protect Piltover from her attack, using her misdeeds to defeat the Black Rose once and for all. Not far behind Mel is her lover Jace, co-founder of Hextech and almost co-destroyer of the world.
It was revolutionary.
It's sad, honestly. All Jace wanted was to make the world a better place, and he did that in some ways, just not without many, many more sacrifices. From betraying his mentor just so he could get more progress faster, to killing Victor's followers for the sake of destroying Hextech, Jace seemed like he was going on a bit of a villain arc, especially at the end of Act 2, where he seemed to have straight up killed Victor. But right in Episode 7, some stuff is revealed that really recontextualizes Victor's actions. After being sent by the Arcane into a pretty horrible alternate dimension, Jace discovers that Hextech literally will cause the end of the world.
No. It can't be.
Man, if only there was some little furry dude who was trying to warn you about all that. But better late than never, I guess. In the finale, Jace reaches out to Victor one last time to show him the absolute mess they've caused, and they choose to die together in order to stop Victor's newfound power from spreading any further. In the end, he was a good friend and a good man, just one who made a lot of horrible decisions along the way. And just narrowly avoiding the gray area, next up is Caitlyn. First things first, let's talk about that scene. Yeah, you know the one, where the entirety of Piltover and Zaun are getting ready for war, and Kate takes the opportunity to have some alone time with Vi, definitely earning the Lust Sinner medal. Well, while Kate is usually the archetype of a lawful good character, she's easily swayed by her emotions. That is, on the rare occasion she lets them take over. She is generally compassionate and altruistic, showing pity towards Huck's shimmer addiction, for instance. But she also has a temper. When Vi stops her from shooting Jinx and likely catches Isha in the crossfire. What's more, she was manipulated into working for Mbessa, who's already guilty of some serious war crimes herself. But thankfully, Kate eventually sees the light, emphasis on eventually, after using Maddie as a rebound and cheating on her, which, mind you, was before anyone knew Maddie was a traitor. Kate ultimately helps save Piltover from Mbessa and Victor.
Remember.
Shut up and fight!
fighting the former head-on and losing an eye in the process. In the end, she sticks with Vi and is proven to genuinely love her. Still, while Kate is ultimately a decent person and has a lot of heroic deeds, she's done way too much shady stuff for us to place her any higher. And to close out our good section, we have Mr. and Mrs. Kierman. Neither of them had too much screen time, really. All we know is that they cared about protecting Piltover from criminals, willing to make the necessary sacrifices to do so, and they genuinely love their daughter. Despite her disdain for much of Zon, Mrs. Kierman is willing to give Vi some semblance of a chance after seeing how much she means to Kate, which is some true familial love. In a world of all kinds of steampunk characters, these two just seem like normal people. Just very rich normal people. And with the good section wrapped up, it's time to move into more morally neutral territory. These characters fall in the gray area. With how many great and terrible people Arcane has, this is surprisingly the shortest section of today's list, and it begins with Counselor Salo. If I had to describe his personality, I'd say he's a lot like Prince Charming from Shrek 2, only much less evil and only having half of his body crushed. This poor guy went through it in Season 2, becoming a paraplegic and witnessing the deaths of 3 of his colleagues in an instant. He had every right to go on the offensive against Zon.
To think we nearly extended sovereignty to the creatures who did this.
And that anger is unfortunately the exact thing Ambessa used against him.
If we do not defend ourselves with Hextech, our principles will mean nothing.
While it's easy to dislike him for his ego and his disdain for Vi's home turf, it's understandable that he'd want to avenge his fallen friends and legs. What's more, he changed course pretty quickly after being healed by Victor.
I owe Victor everything.
Which shows that he isn't really a hero or a villain, just a guy who is suffering some very severe pain. But let's discuss the other counselors, Haskell, Bulbuck, and Shula. Or for those of you who didn't spend several minutes googling their names, Beard Guy, Robot Guy, and Clock Necklace Lady. Not much is known about these 3 other than the fact that they were counselors doing their jobs. 2 of whom died, and the other of whom proceeded to do basically nothing for the rest of the season. They're doing their best to govern topside, but the fact is that they can be insensitive to the Zonites and their plight, more than willing to risk their lives if it means taking down Silco and Jinx. As a result, we can't rank them any higher. Arguably the toughest character to rank here, up next is Victor. And when I say tough to rank, man, I really mean it. Victor is a character who could be viewed as a hero, a neutral party, a victim, or a flat-out villain, all depending on how you view him. So let's look at him objectively. In Season 1, Victor helps Jace with his research, becoming a co-founder of Hextech and working on perfecting it to the point of obsession.
We can be improving lives with Hextech now.
Victor's core characteristics is a serious case of tunnel vision, because working on the Hex Core is his whole life, born out of a desire to heal his own diseases and to help others with theirs. All of this makes Victor sound like an absolute saint, and it's backed up in the first act of Season 2, where he basically becomes a sort of pseudo-Jesus figure after nearly dying in Jinx's attack. Unfortunately, he's more of a corrupt Jesus figure. He's got healing powers, sure, and to an extent he does genuinely want to help make other people's lives easier. But the way he goes about this is a few steps too far. Victor comes to believe that to end injustice and suffering in the world, he has to turn every human being into a soulless husk of their former self, essentially becoming a hive mind that he calls the glorious evolution. He's also more than happy to possess his followers as vessels to deliver messages, which is at least a little cult-like. When Jace finally breaks through his corrupted armor, literally, the pair are able to reconcile and finish what they started. All the while, Victor is horrified at all the terror he caused. It's a bittersweet ending to their character arcs, and it goes to show that even the most pure and noble people have the capacity for unspeakable evil. And with that, we move from one of the most complex, morally debatable characters in the Arcane universe to a crackhead. Huck is a very minor character, only really seen a few times throughout the series. You may remember him as the scrawny guy who Vander made sure got the full price for his wares. Unfortunately, Huck later falls victim to the shimmer addiction Zon is suffering from, an addiction so severe that he willingly betrays Vi and Kate to Silco for another hit. Addiction is an ugly reality in the world, so we can't help but feel sorry for Huck, and at least for a little while, he got to be healed by Victor's cult. Not the happiest ending out there, but far from the worst one to be sure. But let's talk about the deuteragonist/antagonist of the whole series, Jinx. Formerly known as Powder, Jinx is probably arguably one of the most tragic villains in cartoon history. At a young age, this inventor in training wanted nothing more than to be a help to her older siblings on their adventures. This desperate longing led to an explosion that killed Vander, Milo, and Klager, dissolved her relationship with Vi, and resulted in Powder herself being taken in by a local steampunk Nazi Silco. In her new home environment, Jinx is manipulated and raised into a superweapon with a variety of smaller, cutesier superweapons.
Maybe we should try the other.
Like a big rocket launcher shaped like a shark. Very creative, at least. Now, I won't deny that Jinx has done some horrific things during her time in the series. Mass murder, terrorism, kidnapping, torture, and even trespassing. But beneath that concerning rap sheet isn't some master criminal or sadist or anything like that. The sad fact is that Jinx is just a girl who desperately wants love and nurturing, something that Silco provided in his own toxic way. In Season 2, when she discovers Vander is still alive, albeit now a furry against his will, she drops everything to tell Vi so the two can reunite with their old man, which leads to a slow and steady healing of their relationship. In the end, Jinx sacrifices herself to simultaneously put Vander out of his misery and save Vi's life, giving her the chance to die as a hero after going through some true horrors. If things had been different, Jinx could have been a perfectly decent person. But at the end of the day, she always had a good heart, just a heart that was corrupted to the point where she did some horrible things. But that final act of self-sacrifice and love was what gave Jinx a peaceful end on her own terms. And as sad as it is, it was also beautiful. Now this may be a bit more controversial, but closing out our gray area is Marcus, the treacherous sheriff from Season 1. Marcus is the type of character who's incredibly easy to hate right off the bat, but for a side character, he actually has a really solid arc. He cooperates with Silco out of fear for himself and his daughter, which is terrible. But what makes Marcus sympathetic is that he actually didn't know how bad Silco was, at least not to the fullest extent. After witnessing the deaths of several innocents, including his superior, Marcus was enraged at Silco and wanted out, only staying in business because of his daughter, who Silco made thinly veiled threats against.
I don't need favors. I need you to do your job.
Now, I'm not saying Marcus didn't dig his own grave, but at the end of the day, 90% of what he did was under extreme duress, and he was held back from becoming a full-on villain by the simple fact that he had a decent conscience. It's also worth noting that Marcus does have one good deed under his belt. While in any other scenario, kidnapping and imprisoning a teenage girl would be a horrific deed, Marcus had a point that Silco would have murdered Vi without hesitation if he saw her. In a twisted way, without Marcus, Vi would be dead. And while he's not a good guy, he's not a total villain either. He's just a man who made horrible decisions and died trying to minimize the damage. But with that said, it's time to move into the dark side and talk about the characters who fall in the bad and evil category. And believe me, there are plenty. Kicking off this category is a bit of an unconventional choice, Warwick. The magnum opus of Singed. Warwick is the reanimated corpse of Vander, one of the many twisted creations of the Mad Doctor in his effort to cure death itself. While initially he does retain some of his memories, Warwick is Vander in body only. And unlike Vander, Warwick is driven by sheer bloodlust and animal instincts, attacking his opponents with neither mercy nor hesitation. That's all pretty bad, but given the fact that Warwick is a reanimated corpse who lacks human intelligence, we have to call him way less evil than some of the real monsters this series has to show. Out of all the characters whose rankings changed because of Act 3, Maddie was the most surprising, especially considering there was, like, no hint that she was a traitor to Kate. But then Episode 9 dropped and out of nowhere, just boom, she's on Ambessa's side again.
I did appreciate your warmth.
Maybe she heard about Kate's fling with Vi and wanted revenge, or maybe she and Ambessa had something going on, who can say? Well, certainly not Maddie now. Talk about a fall from grace. And we've now entered our bottom 10, and first up is Rennie, one of Silco's followers. Alongside Finn, she plotted to betray Silco and have him killed by Savica after her son was killed during Jace and Vi's attack on the Shimmer factory. That leads us to why she isn't any lower. Despite being guilty of some serious crimes, even being the head honcho of the terrorist attack in the first act of Season 2, Rennie was a grieving mother dealing with the pain and anguish of losing a young son. It doesn't excuse anything she did, but it at least paints her in a kind of sympathetic light. And the last of the lesser evils is Savica. Silco's second in command. Going back to Rennie and Finn's attempted betrayal, that scene goes to show Sevika's best quality, loyalty. For all her faults, all her many faults, she's loyal to her cause to the very end, and her cause is to liberate the people of Zon by any means necessary. She refuses to hand one of her own over and can rally the people to fight together.
We don't hand over our people.
It's clear to see that Sevika is driven by a desire to be free by crushing the people who have oppressed them for years, for which we'll give her the Wrath Sinner Medal. Oh, but if only that loyalty extended to Vander. Along with her followers, Sevika abandoned Vander in Season 1 when he committed the unforgivable act of not wanting to attack topside and get more of their people killed. Which shows that, as loyal and dedicated as Sevika is, she's also cold and tunnel-visioned, never hesitant to kill whoever she needs to in order to get the job done. Sevika isn't a good person, but she cares about her people in her own twisted, violent way. Still have no idea why they made her a counselor, though. Like, seriously, Sevika got hired on, but Heimerdinger trying to prevent a nuclear apocalypse was too much. Really? Okay, I'll drop it for now, but let's move on to some good old-fashioned police brutality with Rictus. And yeah, I'll be honest, that's basically all I got from this dude. Rictus was Ambessa's right-hand man and one of the most skillful fighters in the series. He had no qualms with carrying out his boss's orders, no matter how brutal they were. In some cases, he almost seemed to enjoy torturing Jinx's followers to get information.
Your death will be a deep cut.
The villains are about to get way more complex and or intense, so for right now, just enjoy the simple villainy of being a really bad cop. And what better way to follow him up than with his boss, Ambessa Medarda. As a high-ranking, powerful Noxian warlord, Ambessa is the embodiment of why her family is feared. The Medarda name is synonymous with merciless, iron-fisted rule, and Ambessa is fully dedicated to upholding that, to the point where she banished her own daughter for not living up to expectations. Said expectations basically being willing to kill whoever she needs to without hesitation. That's a crime worthy of the Pride Sinner Medal for sure. But worry not, Mama Medarda here knows how to get even dirtier. Even if we were to ignore that one-off scene where she seems to be hiring a prostitute, the way Medarda uses people like commodities is downright unsettling. She manipulates Salo and Caitlyn to do her bidding, while they're at their most vulnerable, and doesn't see anything wrong with some bloodshed if it's for the right cause. Just look at the finale. She was using Maddie, a very visibly young woman, as a spy, and had barely any reaction to her being murdered. It was like a mild inconvenience to her, at worst. The only overtly good thing to say about Ambessa is the fact that she does genuinely love her family, and did all she could to protect them. Being stalked by the Black Rose just made that seriously difficult. But as bad as Ambessa was, there are some characters who sank even lower. On that note, let's move to the lowest parts of Zon and talk about Deckard, who you might remember as the lowlife who roughed Vi and the gang up in episode 1 for their treasure. Being willing to rob children is low, even by criminal standards, but after being thoroughly beaten, this dude and his lackeys still chase down Powder, get their hands on their haul. Ultimately, Deckard goes from a monster to a literal monster when he allows Silco and Singed to test out Shimmer on him, turning him into a mindless monster and proving that he's the type of guy who will do anything to get more power for himself. He doesn't have any ambitions or convictions or anything really. He's just a self-serving lowlife, and one of the few people in Zon who lives up to Piltover's generally low view of them. But taking the number 5 spot for most evil is Finn. Finn led the charge in the attempt to betray Silco, deciding that fascism itself wasn't enough. Finn wanted fast fascism.
Ego is one thing, brains another.
And if he had to kill the guy who brought him to power to begin with, so be it. Unlike Rennie, he doesn't even have a personal stake in the matter, at least no more than the average Zonite. So he's just doing this out of impatience and hunger for power. That thirst to usurp his boss's empire wins him the Envy Sinner Medal, and a free neck surgery, courtesy of Sevika. Landing just outside of our bottom 3, we have Smeech. Don't let his looks fool you. This guy will do a lot worse than just trying to steal your lucky charms. The moment Silco died, Smeech was one of the many crime lords who tried to take the power vacuum he left in his wake. The result was everything from raids in enemy territory to attempts at kidnapping Jinx for ransom.
But I got a different solution. We give them Jinx. That's all they really want.
making Savika look like a model citizen, since even she refused to hand over a fellow Zonite. What's more is that Smeech cares nothing for his allies. If he has a lackey that he can send in as a helpful spy to scout the area, so be it. He was a coward who did nothing but reap the harvest from his manservants, which earns him the Greed Sinner Medal. But without him, we never would have seen Savika's cool new robot arm in action, so we appreciate him for that.
Wait. There's a deal to be struck here.
Now, the Bronze Medal of Evil we have to give to the man formerly known as Dr. Revik, Singed. Now, to start things off, Singed has one, and only one, redeeming quality. He loves his daughter. In fact, everything he does in his scientific pursuits is done in an attempt to cure his daughter's terminal illness, which makes him a totally justified and sympathetic kid. No, it doesn't.
Why aren't you playing with the others?
Look, it's good that he loves his daughter. What parents wouldn't do what they could to save their child's life? The problem with Singed isn't that he loves his daughter and wants to cure her illness, but it's that he dedicates his entire life to defying the laws of nature itself.
I too once had a daughter.
He's kidnapped, tortured, experimented on, and ultimately killed countless people to find that ever-elusive cure, extending his own lifespan in the process.
Chin up, little one. I'll tell you a secret. We won't be staying long.
Worst of all, he invented Shimmer, leading to the events that kickstarted the series story and ruined the lives of everyone in Zon. You know, like they were even good to begin with. It's tragic to think that he went so far out of love for his daughter, but the simple fact is that Singed was willing to kill countless people and ruin the lives of even more, which makes him one of the worst people in the series, without a doubt. But he had to have some sort of funding to do that, which leads us to the Silver Medal of Evil winner, Silco. Like Singed, Silco was a villain whose unspeakable acts were often swept under the rug by fans in favor of love for his adoptive daughter. Now, as a villain, we love Silco, and his relationship with Jinx is easily his best attribute since he did genuinely love her. Even after the chance of having Zon liberated by the Council in exchange for Jinx, he refused to hand her over.
Is there anything so undoing as a daughter?
And even when he died by her own hands, he spent his final moments comforting her. All that's great, but that makes it easy to forget who Silco really was. After Felicia's death, while Vander was racked with grief, Silco was still laser focused on uniting the nation of Zon. This would lead him to be betrayed by Vander and unleash his full ruthlessness. And just how far does that ruthlessness go? Well, Silco is responsible for the Shimmer drug epidemic in the Undercity, which is made even worse by the fact that he's from the Undercity. By keeping everyone hooked on the stuff, Silco keeps his own pockets fat and everyone else terrified of him. He's more than willing to torture his own followers and will threaten their families, kids included, to keep them in line.
Fear haunts us all, child.
I mean, let's not forget how Silco indirectly threatened to kill Marcus's young daughter if he didn't follow his orders.
Let's talk outside.
Can't you see we're playing?
And worse than that, he knocked over her building blocks. She worked really hard on those, Silco. Look, the guy may be a loving adoptive dad to Jinx, but Silco was still pretty close to pure evil. Sure, there's some good in him, just like there is in Jinx, but unlike her, Silco never chose to even try and walk away from the cycle of killing, which proves his nature is just that. A cold-hearted killer who just happens to have a daughter he loves. No matter how you slice it, anyone who could be both a drug lord and a child laborer is pretty irredeemable, no matter how loving his final words to Jinx were.
You're perfect.
But as sinister as Silco is, at least he had a redeeming quality. On the other hand, our gold medal of evil has to go to the group that has nothing of the sort, the Black Rose. So it turns out that Mel has these cool secret magical powers that put a target on her back for a cult of evil sorcerers known as the Black Rose. These guys mean business, working to influence high-ranking families all around the world. They'll disfigure, mutilate, and otherwise torment their targets however they need to get their hands on whatever they're after. By arguably having killed Kino and definitely having attempted to kill Ambessa.
What you've stolen is more precious than any gold.
They hope to inch closer to Mel and get their hands on her power, even using her dead brother's likeness to fish for information. What's strange about the Black Rose, and admittedly a bit frustrating, is that we don't know what exactly they want with Mel's powers. All we know is that they were willing to kidnap her brother and hold him for ransom to get Mel in exchange, a deal too horrific for even Ambessa to accept.
Where is my brother?
Regrettably, his fate wasn't among your mother's lies.
You killed him.
The Black Rose's ultimate goal is unknown, and thanks to Mel taking them down, it can hopefully stay that way. Because if this dark magic cult was enough to unsettle Ambessa, we can only imagine what it planned to do to the rest of the world.